Good morning, everyone. This is Katie Hyatt speaking from FinEquity. Thank you for joining us on this bright Monday morning. I'm really excited to be here today with Phil Roessler from the College of William and Mary, who's come up especially to give a webinar on his research, the research that he's done with REPOA. This research is on mobile phone ownership and the uptake and usage of digital financial services by women in Tanzania. This research is particularly interesting because it's longitudinal. It didn't come out of nowhere. It started with a pilot in 2014 and has gradually been scaled up to the sort of research that we'll discuss today, which was a 2,000 person sample in 2016, 2017. There's an absolute wealth of knowledge in here. So I think that my fear is, how much of this are you all going to be able to take away? I've looked at the research a number of times, and every time I find something new in it. The good news is we will be sharing the slides at the end of this. And for those of you in DC, Phil will be at the DC Social this evening. So please do come along, if you're registered or register, and speak to Phil in person. I want to give as much time as possible to Phil to present his findings, but I'll quickly introduce him. He is the Associate Professor of Government and the Director of the Center for African Development at William and Mary. He's an expert in the study of African development with a focus on spatial inequality, civil war, and mobile technology. An unexpected trifecta. On mobile tech, he has run several large randomized controlled trials in Tanzania to better understand the pathway from mobile phone ownership to the uptake and usage of digital financial services. Right before I hand over the mic, two housekeeping things. Please send us your questions. We're going to have half an hour at the end of Phil's presentation to take your questions, so please send them through. And if you would like to do us a kindness, please fill out the survey, the poll at the end of this, at the end of the presentation. It really is useful for us. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Phil.
Thank you so much, Katie, and thank you so much to CGAP for hosting me this morning. Very happy to talk to you all about our research on the impact of mobile phone ownership on the uptake and usage of digital financial services in Tanzania. This is a collaborative project with REPOA in Tanzania and myself, Dr. Flora Mayamba from the Women in Social Protection in Tanzania group, and Dan Nielsen at Brigham Young University. We've been working together with REPOA since 2014 to look at mobile phone ownership and mobile money use and its downstream impact on women's economic livelihoods. So this is collaboration with Flora, Dan, and also Cornell Johari from REPOA and Blandina Kalama of REPOA and Peter Carroll at the University of Michigan. So I want to start today with the big takeaways from our research. Right, what have we learned from undertaking one of the first large-scale field experiments on mobile phone ownership on mobile money use? So first is we confirm the finding that CGAP has done great research on this. Connected Women Program has done great research on this. Getting phones in the hands of women matters for their uptake and control of mobile money in emerging economies. We have very precise estimates on the impact of mobile phone ownership on use of mobile money, and I'll talk about exactly the impact sizes we see. But we also see that mobile money use, uptake, and use is a journey, right? It's an incremental process. And so our experiment does provide a bit of a reality check that we see, when you get a phone, you do start to use mobile money, but you do not become a super user overnight or even after 1 year. I think we have to understand that incrementalism and also some of the barriers that continue, women continue to face. The other, in our experiment, we compare basic handsets to smartphones In our experiment, these are women who at the outset do not own a phone, right? They may have owned one in the past, but at the start of the study, they did not own a phone, right? So it's receiving either a basic handset or a smartphone. And we don't find any leapfrogging effect from receiving a smartphone for the individual woman in Tanzania. And in fact, we see that basic handsets outperform smartphones in the use of mobile money. And this is an important finding. Basically one of the takeaways is it's important to match the technology, the mobile technology, with the user's experience and kind of digital literacy at the beginning. Something we did not anticipate that we see in the study is that both in the basic and smartphone groups, phone turnover or phone churn was much higher than we anticipated. 30% of the women in the basic and smartphone groups did not own a phone at the end of the study, despite us providing them a cost-free phone a year previously, right? So understanding that phone loss matters, quite a bit because, we find, not surprisingly, this really hinders impact, right? Losing your phone is a big setback for digital financial services. And so I'll walk through that. And then the last point is thinking about different methodologies we can use to study this very important topic and the role that field experiments can play. Right, and we know field experiments, experimental methods are very good for identifying the causal impact of, let's say, owning a mobile phone on use of mobile money. But what we also found in this study is that experiments are very good for process tracing. And what do I mean by that? Is when you do an experiment, you want to know if people are taking the medicine, right? So in this case, the medicine is a mobile phone. So we carefully process trace from the outset when they received the phone to midline, whether they still had it, and if they did, how they used it. If they didn't, what happened to it, and then endline, at 12 months later, where was the phone and how were they using it? So carefully process tracing that out, we've borne out a lot of insights. Okay, so in the rest of this, the talk, I'll walk you through our methodology and the key findings, focusing here on the uptake and use of mobile money. Right? We can then, later talk about the downstream effects on economic livelihoods. I just want to start, though, by just briefly talking through our larger research program. It's important that you understand we ran a very large field experiment in Tanzania across 5 regions. It was over 1 year. It was supported by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and the key insights I'll talk about today come from that very large study. But we didn't just start with a very large field experiment, right? We started very small, and that's very important in doing piloting to make sure you get this methodology right, because the essence of our methodology is to work with non-phone owners and provide them with a cost-free mobile phone, right? Not just a phone, but also a SIM card and on-site registration of that SIM by an agent from the mobile network operator, right? So some non-phone owners receive a phone and others do not at the outset of the study. They will receive one at a future date. So in our first pilot, it was just 3 months. In phase 3, it was 1 year later. So this is a waitlist design. Some receive the intervention up front. Some receive the intervention at a later date. And determine who receives, in this case, the phone, we use the lottery, right? Random assignment. And we told the participants that we're working with REPOA. We're doing, and we have a program providing mobile technology to women to try to increase women's use of mobile phones. Are you interested in participating? They consented if to participate or not. And then if they participated, said excellent. We look forward to working with you. Here is the nature of the program. We don't have enough phones to provide everyone right now in year 1, but don't worry. In year 2, we will get more phones. and we will use a lottery to decide who gets phones in year 1 and who gets phones in year 2. So this provides fairness that, everyone knows they're getting that technology, but then also gives us, a causal identification or a way to identify the impact of the phone versus not having a phone among the program participants. And so you can see that this is, a sophisticated research design that, takes some work to figure out the kinks and, pilot it to make sure people understand this methodology, that they perceive it as fair. So that's why we started very small and then worked our way up to do a large field experiment. And let me just say that after phase 1 and phase 2, we asked participants whether they thought this methodology was fair, right? That was fair to use a lottery to provide phones, to some in year 1 and some to year 2, and more than 2/3 thought this was a fair methodology, right? So they understood it, they thought that was fair, and we think that's important because experiments are fantastic in terms of identifying the impact of an intervention, but they also, mean that some are going to be getting this intervention and some not, and that can have distributional consequences, and we have to think about that. So I'm going to talk now about phase 3, the large scale field experiment we did, and this is going to be among the non-phone owners. So in phase 3, we had 2,000 women who we recruited. So 1,352 did not own a phone, and 648 owned a phone. So we had actually 2 experiments here, one among non-phone owners and one among phone owners. I want to talk here about the experiment on non-phone owners. So what we did is we worked with TASIS and BRAC across 5 regions of Tanzania, not perfectly representative, but we get a good cross-section of different regions of Tanzania. We screened people for phone ownership, a very kind of inconspicuous survey asking whether they owned a phone. If they didn't own a phone, they were eligible. We did a baseline survey and to get all kinds of background information about the participants, especially their use of mobile money and a mobile phone to date. And then we told them about the mobile phone program, and we asked them if they were interested, and if they said yes, then we said, we're providing cost-free mobile technology. Some will get it in year 1, some will get it in year 2. And then we did the phone distribution. Now, everyone in the study, all 1,352 women, were invited to the distribution, and they all received SIM cards, right? We offered a SIM card to everyone from one of the major MNOs in Tanzania that had the best coverage in the region. Now, this is important because the impact we are seeing is comparing those in the control group who have a SIM card and who were signed up for mobile money by MNO agents on site, right? So everyone was provided a SIM, signed up, had their SIM registered. So the control group even got that. What's different is that in the treatment groups, they also received a phone, right? So we can really isolate the impact of the phone. And so you might be worried, well, isn't this just the impact of you registering, women for and giving them a SIM card, getting them signed up for mobile money? Isn't that the impact we're seeing? And we can say, no, this is the impact of the mobile phone because everyone received that type of signing up for mobile for a SIM card, which is important, right? I mean, it's costly to go out and get a SIM, as we know. Many don't do that. Okay. So in terms of the conditions in our study, everyone received the SIM, and then we randomly assigned into different conditions. So there are 4 basic conditions here, as you can see. So some were in the control, so they did not receive a phone until year 2, until 1 year later. The second condition was an unconditional cash grant, a $20 cash grant, which we see as a placebo, which is the same value as the basic phone, but isn't a phone. Then others received a basic phone, the Nokia 105, and then others received a smartphone, the Huawei Y360. Now we did do cross-cutting interventions across these 4 basic conditions. We also randomly assigned solar chargers. We provided monthly credit vouchers, so every month some would get a $5 credit from the mobile network operator that they could use as they wished. And then some received no training, some received individual training, how to use the phone you received, and some received this training in group. And I'm happy to talk about the cross-cutting interventions in the Q&A, but I'll focus mainly on the results from the main assignment, right? So what is the impact of having a phone versus not having a phone? And what is the impact of a basic phone versus a smartphone? So first, it's important, of course, we know who are the participants in our study. Again, these are non-phone owners, and we worked with BRAC and TASIF, Tanzania Social Action Fund, to recruit our participants. So overall, the age of the participants tended to be a bit older than women in Tanzania. 40% were fully literate. Most were smallholder farmers. And then you can see that at baseline, the household had less than one phone in the household, right? So at the household level, our study is looking at the impact of this household going from less than one phone to a second phone, right? So we can think about individual effects, right? This is the impact of this phone on this woman's use of mobile money and her economic livelihood. But we can also think, well, then what's the impact on the household, right? A household going from less than a phone to now double the mobile phone capacity in the household. And you can see that most, don't have a mobile money account at baseline, right? So these are, on average, these are the baseline characteristics. So what are the key findings, right? And so I will focus here again on the uptake and use of digital financial services. So, first we asked, so we did the baseline, a survey before we did the phone distribution, then we did a midline at 6 months, and then we did an endline 12 to 13 months later. And so from this figure, if you look at the graph, you can see at baseline, mobile money, the frequency of mobile money use is quite low. And in the question at baseline was a little bit different than the question at midline, endline. So this is, the baseline level is really a really low floor. Probably the true use of mobile money was probably closer to once every 6 months, right? So at the outset, women in our study are using mobile money once every 6 months. And we can see over time that those receiving the phone, they use mobile money much more than those in the control group and also the cash group, right? So we see the impact of receiving a phone, right? It really provides, these women a leg up in using mobile money. And what you can see is that over time, the basic phone users outpace the smartphone recipients in the use of mobile money. Now why is that? Well, what we see is that the basic phone seems to be a better match for these women's digital fluency or mobile fluency going in. And what we saw in the smartphone group was a lot of exchange of the smartphone for a basic phone. So trading down that smartphone for a basic phone, probably with someone within their household. And it looks like there was a kind of transaction cost or friction, right, of not receiving the technology that best kind of fits your digital fluency. And then that leads to some friction. You trade it, and that hurts your mobile money use, right? So this is a kind of important implication, when we are trying to increase the adoption of mobile technology. Let's make sure it matches, because there is a cost at the individual level to trying to change and find a phone that better fits you. We signed everyone up. We registered a SIM card, provided them with mobile money account. Those who continued to use that same phone throughout used it a bit more than those who exchanged it. Now, we do see at the household level strong effects of the smartphone. So we see differences at the individual and the household level. Generally, at the individual level, the basic phone helped improve these women's mobile money use and livelihoods. At the household level, we see a bit of stronger effect of the smartphone. And that's because the smartphone seems to have increased household mobile phone capacity more than the basic phone. And happy to talk more about that in the Q&A. Now, let's think about the impact across different strata of women in our study. On average, these women tended to be 45 years old and farmers, but but we also, of course, have variation within the study of lower levels of literacy, higher levels of literacy. And what we do see as the strongest effects are for those who are traditionally less likely to own phones. Right? Of course, they're starting from a much lower base, but if they get their hands on a phone, it does have a substantial impact on their use. Right? So that's important, right? We shouldn't, lose sight of these older women, rural women, lower levels of literacy, right? If they have their own phone, it does matter for their mobile money use. Of course, the absolute use of mobile money by them is going to be lower, but it still improves their use of mobile money. Now, also, it's important to see from this graph that we see substantial and significant effects of receiving a phone, having your own phone on mobile money use. But again, the absolute effects are not high, right? We're going from using mobile money once every 6 months to those in the basic phone group to about once a month, right? So on average, receiving your own phone, getting a SIM, getting mobile money account, on average does not mean that these women are going to be using mobile money every day, right? On average, they're using it once a month. And now that's, those in the control group, they're only using it once every 3 months, right? So this is substantial, but again, they're not becoming super mobile money users overnight or over 1 year. And so what are they using mobile money for? Again, this is very consistent with a lot of the work that TGAP has done and others have done, is that it's mainly for remittances, sending and receiving money. For other types of services and transactions, there is little demand for or preference for using mobile money. And in fact, those in the phone group, we see no significant impact on digital payments. Right? So if you received a phone, are you more likely to use digital payments? Are you more likely to demand digital payments beyond sending and receiving mobile money? No. Right? We do see a significant effect on you're more likely to save money in your mobile money account than under your mattress. That's important. Right? Those who receive the phone, they're more likely to save on their phone than under the mattress. But it's an incremental effect. Right? It's an incremental effect. So another way that we analyze the impact of mobile phone ownership on mobile money use is through an on-the-spot mobile money test. And I just want to walk through this because the other data I've reported so far is survey responses, right? How frequently do you use mobile money? How often do you save under your mattress, in a bank, on mobile money? There's self-reported information in the survey. Here, at the end of both the midline and end line, we wanted a behavioral measure of mobile money. Are these participants actually using mobile money? And to assess this, what we did is we offered each participant a micro grant. And this micro grant could either be paid in cash or as mobile money. And we varied the amounts we offered to see if they were given a premium to use mobile money, whether they would take the grant as mobile money rather than cash. Right? So our assumption was if you have mobile money and are a user of mobile money, if we offer you a strong premium to take a cash grant or a grant as mobile money, surely you would do that. Right? You would not forego, this extra, Tanzanian shillings and take it as cash, right? So in terms of varying the different amounts, when the amounts are same or cash is higher, virtually everyone takes cash, right? Not surprisingly. But then when we varied the mobile money offer, what was interesting is that we did not see as much acceptance as mobile money as we expected. Right? So as you see here at the bottom of the slide, when mobile money was 33% higher than cash, only 7% were taking mobile money. Despite that mobile money premium being this higher amount. And when we increased the premium to 80%, still only 47% were taking mobile money. And then we offered 100% premium, twice as much money, right? Paying people to take this as mobile money. Only 56% were taking mobile money. So what did participants say about why they didn't take mobile money? So some didn't have a phone, right? So this is those in the control group who aren't going to have a phone. But even those in the, as I'll talk here shortly, even those in the treatment groups, the basic group and the smartphone group, they also, as I mentioned, 30% were without a phone by the end. Liquidity concerns, they need money for immediate use. They never registered for mobile money. Now, of course, we did enroll everyone in mobile money. So some, didn't understand that. The mobile money agent is too far away. And you can see that also there were some concerns about withdrawal. How what's the cost? The transaction cost, the cost of cashing in mobile money. Not understanding that. Now, how did phone ownership affect taking mobile money in this on-the-spot mobile money test? Right. So what we do see is that consistent with the self-reported data, owning your own phone mattered for mobile money use. Right. So if you were in the phone group, basic or smart, you were more likely to accept mobile money when it was 100% premium over cash. Right. So we see that receiving your phone, using it, you do become a user of mobile money. But I think what's one of the most striking things we see is we say, okay, we're going to offer you a micro grant. We'll give you around $2 in cash or $4 in mobile money, right? Do you prefer cash or mobile money, right? So more in the phone group will say, I'll take mobile money, and then we ask them. So on the spot, we sent them the mobile money, and we said, whose number are we sending that to, right? Is that your mobile money account, or is that someone else's account? And those in the phone group were more likely to have it sent to their own account. So I think this is kind of one of the big important takeaways from this graph here, is this shows the proportion of those who took mobile money in the small grant option and had it sent to their own phone, right? So this is really having kind of being a mobile money user, but then controlling mobile money, right, through using it in your own account. And we can see that giving someone a phone, giving this woman a phone, she has double the control over mobile money than those in the control group, right? So this is an important takeaway. Now, also, this means that 40% in the phone groups were going to have full control over mobile money. That means 60% did not, right? So a year ago, we provided you with a phone, we registered your SIM card, gave you mobile money. A year later, 60% are not, really able to use mobile money when they have a strong incentive to do so and control that mobile money transaction, right? Now, the other takeaway here is that, consistent with the other findings, we can see that the basic phone recipients are more likely to have control over this mobile money transaction and mobile money use than the smartphone participants, right? So consistent that there is a friction or cost of the assignment of smartphones to these users. I mean, they do better than control, but less well than as the basic. Okay, so what hinders mobile money use? So again, very consistent with the great research that's already been done, is we can really see the impact that literacy and education have. Those who are literate, at baseline, we could ascertain that they could read the consent form. They were 40% more likely to choose mobile money in the small grant exercise than illiterate participants, right? Now, the other thing that we see, and this is one of the major implications of our study, is the impact of, as I've alluded to, mobile phone churn or mobile phone turnover. that many participants in our study that we provided this cost-free phone to a year later did not have this phone, right? So 30% in the basic and smartphone groups no longer owned any phone at Endline. And this surprises us. We expected, some phone loss, surely, people will sell it, they lose their phones. We didn't expect this to be so high. And what we also, so what we see with a lot of churn is that those who received a phone, they didn't have a phone, but then, some got a new phone, and then even in the control group, some got a phone, but then they lost the phone. The churn we were seeing was not just in the phone group, and it was not just an artifact of our distribution, of, providing someone with a cost-free phone. The churn we are seeing is not an artifact of that. When you actually look at midline, going from midline to endline, so at 6 months to 12 months. At 6 months, do you have a phone, right? And this is, some people in the control group got phones. They on their own volition, of course they could get a phone. People in the cash group got a phone because they used their cash grant to buy phones, about half did. And then of course those in the basic phone group and smartphone had phones. But then, so who has a phone at midline and then doesn't have a phone at endline? These are the participants we see, and we can see that handset churn or loss is, across all these conditions. So the churn is a broader phenomenon that is affecting, low-income users across the board, probably, globally, surely. And this has really important implications. And I just want to end on this. Not surprisingly, those in the phone group who lose their phone, it's a big setback on mobile money use, right? So if you have the phone, 80% still have a mobile money account. Whereas if you lose your phone, 33% have a mobile money account. Now, losing your phone does not mean you lose your mobile money account, right? Because you might lose your phone and your SIM, but you can go get your same SIM number and retain your mobile money account. But of course, that requires going to the mobile network operator office, telling them your number, showing ID, knowing your PIN, knowing 5 calls you made recently. That is very onerous for low-income individuals. And we have to think about that, right? Because losing your phone happens quite a bit, and that it provides a big setback. So what are the key takeaways in the applications for programming and future research? So let me start with this last point. Right? We can't take for granted that exponential increase in mobile phone penetration leads to continuous ownership, right? So, we all know the figures that mobile phone penetration rates are skyrocketing around the world. But what we see is that among these low-end users, there's going to be a lot of turnover whether they own a phone at a given time. When you lose your phone, if you don't have resources, you have to save for 6 months, a year, 2 years to get a new phone. And we see that in our study, those who lose their phone, many of them still don't have a phone 6 months later, right? You can't, once you lose it, it takes time and a lot of investment to get a new phone. So all of our programming, mobile for development programming, is piggybacking on mobile phone ownership, right? And we have to ask ourselves, how much are we considering the impact that churn and turnover has on our program, on the efficacy of our programming? Let me just talk about cash transfers, right? So many cash transfer programs are using mobile money to disperse, the grants, because that's an efficient way to do so. If 30% of the cash transfer beneficiaries are losing their phone and losing their, SIMs and not able to retain a new one, do we know that? Are we able to, provide support for them? Or do we not know that, but we keep sending the cash transfers and they just go into the black hole of the digital economy? This is the second point. Phone loss need not lead to such severe setbacks in mobile money use, right? There are ways to maintain your mobile money account, but we just think, how can we better, support individuals who do lose their accounts? And then the importance of more research on mobile phone ownership and household dynamics. We see that, the impact of that, those in the household can be both positive and negative, right? So some of this phone loss was from someone else in the household taking the phone, right? And when they confiscated the phone, not surprisingly, that's bad for the household. But when there's shared use between the participant in our study, the woman, and someone else in the study, that's good for the household, right? So, we can think about the household, what a great opportunity for learning and sharing within the household. But if it's not sharing and learning together, it's confiscation, that's bad. It's something, probably well known and obvious, but it jumps out of our study. And finding, just to end, thinking about different methodologies we can use to study mobile technology and the value of mobile, field experiments, not just in thinking about precisely estimating the impact on outcomes, but understanding this process, right? And the journey of going from phone ownership to mobile money use. So let me leave it there, and I'm very happy to take questions that the participants may have.
Thank you so much, Phil. That was an absolute tome of information and extremely interesting. I think that one of the first questions that came up, that's actually come up a couple of times, is can you go further into the reasons for the churn? Is it perhaps you can give us some details around where, what proportion of phones were confiscated or kind of handed up the chain?
Yes, great. Yeah, that's a great question.
Sorry, I'm trying to find the chat. Why don't you go ahead and answer the question while I click around?
Right. So that was one of the the big things, big implications is we see this turnover, and what are the determinants of this? Now some of this is just bad luck, right? And we've all experienced bad luck with phone ownership. We drop our phone, we lose it in a taxi, so we definitely see that. We have reports of women dropping it in the river and it becoming, spoiled. But so that bad luck matters because, as I've said, it is hard, or it takes time for these individuals to acquire the resources to get a new phone, right? So the gap in acquiring a new phone is longer. But there are several systematic factors we can point to. So one is if your household didn't own a phone at baseline, so there is no phone in the household, the women in the study was more likely to lose her phone, right? So that's pointing to household dynamics. That's someone else in the household appropriating the phone. The other thing is age. We were surprised by this. But younger women in our study were more likely to lose the phone, right? So, that surprised us because we expect the younger women to have, be more acquainted with, familiar with mobile technology, but this might also lead to a power dynamic, right? That younger women maybe, there were more asymmetries of power, and they had, had to relinquish their phone. And then the last kind of systematic factor we saw and also surprised us is participants in a microfinance group were more likely to lose our phones. And this surprised us because those in the microfinance group are, on average, tend to be better off women, right? And they'd be small business owners. They should have strong demand for having a phone. And that's true. They were better off. They had previous use with phones. Why were they losing them? And what we see is that it looks like they were having to sell their phones to pay off their microfinance debt. So it points to this vicious cycle between debt and poverty. Is that here is this incredible technology, in powerful enabling device that it can improve your small business and to help you get out of debt, but you have to sell it to pay down the debt you have in the first place. And same with the household factors, right? Asymmetries in the household leading to phone loss. These are structural factors that we, are very familiar with that affect and lead to poverty. What was striking from our study is we see them jumping out and literally taking the phone, from the women, right? Asymmetry in the household, power asymmetry in the household, and debt.
That's really interesting. I want to ask one more question before we go to a question in the room. And this question is from Julia Arnold. Would it be fair to say that mobile money isn't necessarily useful for low-income, middle-aged women? And what would mobile money operators and purveyors have to change to make it useful? And that's a big question.
Right.
I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. Talk about this for the session.
Yeah. Well, so at the individual level, we see, on average, these women who are in the phone group, who receive the phone, we see this, substantial and significant increase in mobile money use, right? And we do also see them telling us that they have higher incomes a year later, right? So now that, we have to be cautious. This is self-reports. This is, how much, but, they didn't know when we were coming at the end line. We came at the end line. We said, we interviewed them. We said, how much money did you make in the previous week, right? And what we see is those in the phone groups are reporting higher incomes. And what we can see is that, one of the mediating factors that lead to this higher income is mobile money use, right? And using the mobile phone for business, kind of generating activities. So, we do see it as useful, right, for, low-income, middle-aged women, right? That was the sample in our study. But there's ways we can make it even more useful, right? And, that the uptake in use is not as high as it could be, right? And we see that, literacy matters a lot. And this speaks to this webinar you just had recently on the importance of digital literacy, right? That, changing literacy is really, really hard and takes a lot of time and investment to do so. It doesn't change overnight. But are there ways that we can improve training in digital literacy to make a phone more useful for, the low-income person who doesn't have, high level of literacy? So we do see that phones matter for low-income, middle-aged women, and that's important for the mobile network operators, right? These smallholder farmers getting a phone, they do use it, and it does help them.
Great. Now we've got a question here from in the room.
Yeah.
Please introduce yourself.
Hi, Sizwa. I have a question that takes us back to the churn.
Yes, please.
So the motivation, I imagine you had a sense of what the motivation for why people wanted to have the phones in the same place, in the first place.
Yes.
I have a question whether you have clarity on proportion of maybe some people may have wanted the phone because they just saw it as as another form of an asset they could trade for cash, meaning that the churn was just someone who came to the system for a phone for cash.
Right.
A second question that I have is on the people who chose cash over mobile money.
Yes.
Do you have a sense of, in terms of the literacy breakdown of maybe the more literate people had a preference for either or, depending on an understanding of what the trade-off is? I think included in that question is also the 33%, 50%, 80%, 100%. Was it an absolute amount, or was that before the transfer fees? Because that, depending on the size of the grant, then people may behave differently if you increase the grant as absolute value.
Great. Yeah, thank you for those questions. Right, so it's important to think about, why participants, signed up for the study and what they expected, and how they expected to use the phone. So most, very strong, nearly all, wanted a phone for communication, to stay in touch with family members and friends, right? Family members who live far away. That was the very dominant answer that came out at the baseline, right? Do you have a phone? No. Would you want one? Yes. Everyone wanted a phone. That wasn't a prerequisite. I mean, they had to sign up for the program. But they didn't have to necessarily want a phone, but nearly everyone wanted a phone, and it was for social reasons, right? We do have some variation. Some people definitely wanted it to use it for business purposes. We have some variation there, but across the board, it was for to stay in touch with friends and family. Now, Absolutely. So they want the phone to be able to communicate, but they could sell the phone, right? They were free to do that, right? We had no restrictions. We provided them the phone. We said, please use it as you wish. We want you to know this is your phone, right? As an individual, we provided them a certificate that they are part of this, mobile phone and Livelihoods of Women program. They received a phone, and this is, in qualitative interviews. I should mention we did some 50 qualitative interviews. We have 600 pages of transcripts of these qualitative interviews. And the women said it was really important that when I received the phone, I also received this certificate. So to explain to, other people in my household and, my neighbors, friends, like, oh, wow, that's a shiny new smartphone. Where do you get that? REPOA is doing this program. I was a beneficiary of that. And that definitely helped to reduce conflict within the household. But so, we wanted them to know that this is their phone, but they're also free to do with it as they wish. So they absolutely could sell it. And we know, we asked them what they did with their phone. There was probably underreporting of selling it, right? When you received a phone from a program, providing technology to increase women's use, probably reluctant to say, oh, I sold it. And so surely that's underreported, but many could have done it. But what's interesting, I think, is to compare those in the phone group to those in the cash group, right? Maybe we should just, if they really want it for cash, let's give them cash, and they can either buy the phone or use the cash, right? Maybe, there's a big movement, of course, to give people unconditional cash and let them do it as they want. What we see is that in this case, cash underperforms giving them a mobile phone, right? Because not everyone in the cash group buys a phone. Many use the cash for food, for household necessities, and over the long run, you're better if you received a phone and had to sell it rather than got cash and had to buy a phone, right? In terms of use of mobile money, in terms of income, in terms of household consumption, right? So the default should be, let's provide a phone, then cash, not let's provide cash and maybe they'll get a phone.
It's really interesting that you mentioned the certificate because, there's been this increasing research around, how do you create or reduce conflict in a household, and how do you use the family as a unit, as focus the family as a team to around mobile money, and it's such a simple intervention. Now, I'm very wary of the fact that we have so many questions coming in, and I next wanted to touch upon the training. We have multiple questions around the training, and I'm hoping that you could speak a little bit, and we will be saving all of these questions, so keep them coming. You will get an answer from Phil either today or in future, I hope. But if we could talk a little bit about the training, that would be great.
Yes, yeah, that's an important question. Great question. Again, if you remember back to our design, we cross-cut training across all of the interventions. So we can precisely estimate the impact of having no training, individual training, group training on the outcomes and use of mobile money, digital financial services. Now, let me just quickly say what the training entailed. So the training was basically a checklist of helping these participants to walk through how to operate their phone, right? Now we had a very large sample size. We did not have a very large capacity in our team to provide, and we did not have the resources to provide in-depth, one-on-one training for 2,000 people, right? So that would be a fantastic next step is, testing different types of training on these outcomes. But we also thought the training we were providing was more realistic, right? Is that, one-on-one training, as we know, is very expensive, right? And not many receive it. Instead, how do people learn about the phone? Well, many, may receive one secondhand, someone in the household. Often they learn from other people in their household, friends. But we wanted to make sure that, to see, well, what's the impact when you get your new phone, if let's say you bought it at a kiosk or a shop, and that person walked you through, you're like, okay, great, here's your new phone, here's how you turn it on, here's how you use your address book, here's how you use mobile money, SMS, phone calls, right? Like the basic things, your torch, your flashlight, listen to the radio. We thought, well, this would simulate, maybe something more realistic if, you bought it at a shop and they would walk you through it, right? So some of that was done individually and some of it was done in a group, right? So a small group of 10 to 20 people in a room. So overall, a year later, we saw no significant impact of this training versus no training, right? So in mobile money use across the board, in some of these economic outcomes, we don't see the impact of training. So no consistent, robust effects like we see consistent and robust effects of owning the phone. On average, it looks like the individual training does better than group training, right? So there's no shortcut from bringing everyone, 20 people at a time doing the checklist. It looks like walking through one-on-one was better. But a year later, having, whether you received your phone without training or received it, going through this checklist, there was no significant and consistent effects. And through the qualitative interviews, we can learn that the participants said, oh yeah, I received the phone and my daughter helped me learn how to use it. My neighbor taught me how to use it, right? So there's clearly demand for this, but it was received, a lot of the learning was from people around them.
That's really interesting. Now we've got a couple of questions here around at first the question is around an increase in remittances with the introduction of phones, and whether or not there was a knock-on effect to household income. And then another question here around a reasonably low level in using mobile money for savings, which is certainly a desired outcome in terms of resiliency. Right. These are sort of both looking at, services or products of mobile money. Do you think you could speak to both of those points?
Right. No, yeah, absolutely. So it is worth considering, as we answer these questions, to think about the set of users, the scope conditions of our study, right? So these are non-phone owners. Now it is, again, 47% had previously owned a phone, consistent with our finding on churn, right? Like 47% had owned a phone previously, and some even within 6 months. So these are non-phone owners, but not some are new phone owners, some are not. But they tend to be on average a bit older, and tend to be smallholder farmers. And so at the outset, their use of mobile technology and mobile money was below average compared to the average Tanzanian, right? So I used FinScope. We looked at FinScope and we said, well, let's compare our participants to those on average in Tanzania. And on average, our participants were on the lower half, right, of Tanzanians using mobile money. Tend to be poor, tend to be a bit older. So that's important scope condition. So among this, group, what do we see? Now, it is, interesting that by the end, they went from the bottom half, those in the phone groups, to the top half of using mobile money, right? And mobile kind of technology fluency. So this program, does push people up. Now, in terms of remittances, yes, again, there's strong demand for that. We think that remittances we do see strong effects on individual self-reported income. And then we also asked about household consumption, right? Using household consumption as a kind of a good measure of one's kind of socioeconomic welfare or their household, level of income. It was a basket of 15 goods. We have this data from baseline, midline, and endline. As you might, there might be social desirability bias that gets into asking, well, what was your income in the previous week? Maybe those in the phone group, more likely to inflate that across 15 baskets of household goods, it's hard to kind of game that. And so we do see strong effects on household consumption, right? But what's interesting is that on the household consumption, and now we also think that remittances are a key part of the story here. That having more mobile money transactions does help to increase the household's economic welfare. But what we see is stronger effects from the smartphone than the basic phone on household consumption. And I think the way this works is the impact on the household's mobile phone capacity. So at baseline, as I said, there were less than 1 phone per household. By end line, those in the smartphone group had 1.6 phones per household. So it was more than doubling the household's mobile phone capacity. So this is, we have few studies that tell us, well, what's, the experimental impact or the causal impact of going from 1 phone to 2 phones. And in our study, we have it, and we really do see a strong impact on household consumption. And what's important here is this is going from 1 user to 2 users. But what's important is that here we see the smartphone doing more of the work than the basic phone. So how can we make sense of that? On the individual level with basic, household smart, we think the smartphone tend to be more used by the household. That the woman tended to trade the smartphone for a basic phone, but then the household still kept the smartphone, and it just strengthened their capacity to use mobile technology, right? And that mattered, and that was stronger than in the basic handset. But let me say something too about the sharing, right? If this smartphone was confiscated by someone in the household, meaning the woman no longer used it at all, that was bad for household consumption. What was good for household consumption is when they received this smartphone and the women continued to have some access to it and some ownership of it. So that, I think, gets to the remittances. And then on savings, yes, we were surprised too that this, we see these significant effects, but they're incremental. And I think it's the ecosystem is important here too, right? The ecosystem, right? Mobile money is fantastic for remittances, but is there a strong digital payments ecosystem in Tanzania, right? They're trying to strengthen it. They're investing in that. The TASIF's investments in e-payments will really, I think, this affect the ecosystem among low-income users. But the ecosystem is just not there yet, where you can do all your transactions in using mobile money or digitally. So I think we have to think not just about individual effects, but also the ecosystem and how they interact. And on the savings, and also we have to think about behaviorally, there's a security to having that savings on your person under your mattress. It's a big leap to put it on your phone, right? And I think that behavioral leap, we have to remember that that's a big leap, and people don't, it's incremental, right? I think there's a lot of excitement, rightfully so, around mobile money, but this is also a nice reality check. Tanzania has an advanced mobile money economy for a low-income country, but they're incremental advances among the lower-income set when they receive a phone.
Thank you. Now, I've just got one final question. Well, I've got lots of questions, but we will get them to you. And just before the final question, please take a look at the poll and fill it out if you feel like doing us a kindness. So we've talked before about some of the recourse around losing your phone or selling your phone and the mobile money account within it. Looking back at the research now, what do you think about the enabling environment? Are there better regulations that could be put in place to ease that process for people who are losing their phone, selling their phone, to help them maintain their mobile money account?
Yes, absolutely. So here there's a clear trade-off between consumer protection and accessibility, right? I mean, so these regulations are put in place that if you lose your SIM, you have to go to the agent, you have to show ID, you have to know your number, your PIN, know these numbers to prevent against fraud, right, and identity theft. And we know these scams, I mean, they're proliferating, right? People trying to take advantage of this. So they're there for good reason, but we also have to think that they're quite onerous, right? Especially for those who are low literacy, we in the micro grant on the spot mobile money test, some didn't take mobile money because they couldn't remember their PIN, right? This is really costly for low-income women. I mean, you read the qualitative interviews, and I mean, it's heartbreaking when someone says, "I dropped my phone in the river, and it had 20,000 shillings, like close to $10 in mobile money on there. Not only did I lost the phone, I lost that $10, right? That's a very large size of their household consumption. That person didn't lose their $10, right? I think also awareness is just for all of these things is the key starting point. And I would, again, something that we need to do next is digital training, but also awareness of, and as we see how significant churn and turnover is, how we can buffer low-income users from this churn and turnover. So some of this is you sell it, some of it it's stolen, some it's appropriated. But no matter the source of the loss, it's a loss of the phone and a setback, and it need not be. So we need to I think about the regulations, strike a balance between accessibility and consumer protection, but we also have to think about, are we doing enough to inform people about what they can do, the steps they can take to ensure that they don't go offline if they lose their SIM. There's also maybe a role for handset insurance. I mean, it's a very difficult market, but I wonder if even just offering this and having people think about this, right? This is an investment for your household. We see the impact it has. Maybe you should invest in protecting this asset. It's an important asset. I think maybe just changing the way we think about this asset, this incredible enabling technology, it's an investment in and of itself, right? Are you doing enough to safeguard it? And are we providing enough support to make sure people can weather the ups and downs that come with owning a phone?
No, that's really useful, and certainly the awareness piece falls into digital literacy. And just a brief reminder, we will be sending out a list of digital literacy resources for you all in the next couple of days. But we've come to time, and I just want to give a huge thanks to Phil Roessler here, who has come up especially for the webinar from Virginia, and we will be sending out the questions. The recording will be available. You can share with all your friends, and we'll be announcing future webinars in the coming weeks. So thank you very much, Phil. We will be hearing a little bit more from you through the questions in the next week. But have a great week, everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And fill out the poll.
Thanks for the great questions. These are fantastic.